When we entered the trenches east of Bakhmut, I was told we would be there for 3 days and 3 nights, and after the third night, on the morning of the fourth day, we would be relieved by a new company. We were told we would just be guarding the trench, not attacking, so it would be easy. We entered the trench, and on the trail behind it were small piles of bodies placed in bags or in the open air. We walked past these piles and into the trenches. The floors were frozen and full of human shit. Everywhere was shit. It was freezing. Some soldiers couldn't take the cold anymore and went into the trees behind the trenches to make fires. This was quite dangerous. The enemy fired mortar bombs at the tree strips, and several soldiers were wounded in this event. Our officer did not come to the position with us, and on the first night, the situation was very difficult. That night, I was very nervous. It was very quiet until someone used a parachute flare into the sky. I did not know who did this, but the message spread quickly that it could be a night attack by NATO-trained shock troops, so we would be ready. I was terribly nervous because I only had a little combat training, and now I may have to be in close combat. We were not totally without support that night. Our artillery began firing over our heads somewhere in front of us around 40 minutes after the flares. This made me confident that if anyone was coming in front of us to attack, they had stopped to think again. The morning came, and I managed to sleep for a little while. The first 2 days, we spent much of the time sitting and surviving. Not eventful, except for artillery and sniper attacks. There began a discussion among the soldiers as what to do with the dead and the wounded we had accumulated during the first day. As for the dead, we didn't have the resources to transport them anywhere, so they were placed behind the positions with the dead of the other unit before us. The wounded, we decided that the walking injured could walk back to the camp, and the heavily injured would be carried. I wanted to go back to the camp to get a break, but I was not chosen for this task, and such, I remained in the trenches for the rest of the day and the next day. At the end of the second day, sometime after sundown, the 8 men who had gone came back to join us. We were quite happy to see them because they brought in fresh equipment and comfort items that were not available the day before. These items being hand-warming packets, small gas stoves to cook and warm ourselves, and a thermal scope. In addition, an officer had come back to join us. Whether he was supposed to be our commander from the beginning, I do not know. I did not find out because I was wounded the next day and brought back to Russia. In training, I was told in the defense we should spit fire in the direction of the enemy randomly to disorient them and distract them and to keep them nervous. There was a machine gun among the group, and this was primarily the weapon we used to spit fire because the ammunition for it was very plentiful. Most of the day, we fired the machine gun randomly into tree strips in front of us. On the third day, the Ukrainians began to attack our section of the front line with SPG fire, infantry, and drones. This was my first and only time seeing the enemy with my own eyes. Our artillery was ready, waiting, and did a great job. The artillery began working on them from their origin point. I left the dugout and entered the trench. I began shooting in the direction of the attack, and I saw one man blown into nothing after one of our shells seemed to strike him almost exactly where he was standing. At this point, the attack slowed down, and they turned around. I was thankful to be alive and that our artillery was able to shoot close enough to help us, but I would not escape the day intact. During the fighting, a quadcopter had flown behind us to observe the Ukrainian assault. I didn't hear it or see it. It dropped a grenade next to me, and it exploded. I remember hearing the bomb hit the ground, and then a severe pain in my head. Metal fragments got into my right eye, and I was permanently blinded. I think there were almost 90 of us in this unit when I arrived. By the time I was medically evacuated, 15 had been killed and at least 20 or more were wounded. The day I was wounded was the end of my service at the front line. My war was approximately 3.5 days long. That was Andrei Sokolov, Russian conscript, the Battle of Bakhmut in January of 2023. Now, as the fighting moved out of the trenches and into the city of Bakhmut itself, the fighting grew more barbaric, intense, and involved a lot more close-quarter combat.